Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all well. I've had one of those weeks, so I'm a bit exhausted, but hopefully it doesn't come through in what I'm saying here today. Okay, the last 6 weeks we've been going over the I am sayings of Jesus. Most of them are in the Gospel of John. We've had I am the bread of life, I'm the light of the world, I'm the gate for the sheep, the good shepherd, and so on. As I've been reading and reflecting on each of these, I realise there's a lot of very deep theology in there for which I'm in no way qualified. And especially as today we've arrived at probably the most famous one, or at least the most quoted one, which is, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except by me. And I've got to be honest, if I could have picked one to speak on, it would not have been this one. And I didn't even know how to frame it, to be honest, until 2 weeks ago when Bola spoke on I am the Good Shepherd. Because at that point, a thought that had been running through my mind since earlier that morning was powerfully confirmed with something that she said. And what she said reminded me of this anecdote, which I'll tell you about. Now, at work, I have a monthly meeting with one of the very senior department heads. We have an informal chat over coffee to discuss how our teams could be working together better, whether there are things that we could do differently and so on. Anyway, last time it was his turn to get the coffees. So I ordered mine, and he said he wasn't going to have one. So I asked, of course, why not? And he said, I'm not drinking coffee anymore. So I said, naturally, why? His answer, Novak doesn't drink coffee. Okay, you're looking very blankly at me, as I was at him. What does that mean? So some backstory. He and his wife had recently joined a very fancy and expensive tennis club, so he thought, I should go there more often. And he figured he should try to be a better player. In his mind, the best tennis player to ever walk the earth is Novak Djokovic. So, of course, if he wants to improve, he's got to do whatever Novak would do. So, when he's tempted to reach for a glass of wine or a cookie or a coffee, he asks, what would Novak do? And he's able to resist. Questions, of course, so many questions came to mind, not least, don't you think the reason Novak is so good at tennis is that he's been playing 6 hours a day since he was a child? But I had to admit, the logic is sound, if that's what you believe. If you are sure that Novak is the very definition of tennis, then doing what he does, living life exactly as he does, should make you a better player. Of that, there's no doubt. So the real question that I was struggling with is a lot simpler. If you want to live like him, surely you would have to know him. And do you? Where am I going with this? Let's dive into the chapter, shall we? It's John 14. I will read it all the way through. Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, I would have told you that I'm going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the way to the place where I am going. Thomas said to him, Lord, we don't know where you are going, so how can we know the way? Jesus answered, I am the way, and the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you really know me, you will know my Father as well. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. Philip said, Lord, show us the Father, and that will be enough for us. Jesus answered, Don't you know me, Philip, even after I have been among you such a long time? Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? Don't you believe that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me? The words I say to you work. Believe me when I say that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me, or at least believe on the evidence of the works themselves. Very truly, I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works I have been doing, and they will do even greater things than these, because I am going to the Father. And I will do whatever you ask in my name, so that the Father may be glorified in the Son. You may ask me for anything in my name, and I will do it. If you love me, keep my commands, and I will ask the Father, And he will give you another advocate to help you and be with you forever, the Spirit of truth. The world cannot accept him because it neither sees him nor knows him, but you know him, for he lives with you and will be in you. I will not leave you as orphans, I will come to you. Before long, the world will not see me anymore, but you will see me. Because I live, you also will live. On that day you will realize that I am in my Father, and you are in me, and I am in you. Whoever has my commands and keeps them is the one who loves me. The one who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love them and show myself to them. Then Judas, not Iscariot, said, "But Lord, why do you intend to show yourself to us and not to the world?" Jesus replied, "Anyone who loves me will obey my teaching. My Father will love them, and we will come to them and make our home with them. Anyone who does not love me will not obey my teaching. These words you hear are not my own. They belong to the Father who sent me. All this I have spoken while still with you, but the Advocate, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you all things and will remind you of everything I have said to you. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled and do not be afraid. You heard me say, I am going away and I am coming back to you. If you loved me, you would be glad that I am going to the Father, for the Father is greater than I. I have told you now before it happens, so that when it does happen, you will believe. I will not say much more to you, for the prince of this world is coming. He has no hold over me, but he comes so that the world may learn that I love the Father and do exactly what my Father has commanded me. Come now, let us leave." I thought it was important to read the whole chapter, and you'll see why. But I want to pull out a couple of verses. He starts with, "You believe in God." And then secondly, verse 7, "If you really know me, you will know my Father as well." Because I want to start with the question, if you stopped believing in God, what would change? Would your life be lived any differently? Or maybe, and if you think back to the very first worship song that we sang, do you remember how you felt before you came to know him, entrapped in a tomb of your own shame? Because if you're here, it's likely that you are looking for some hope, some validation that this is not all there is, that there is more to life, now and to come. And that is a deep human yearning. And the claim is, the brokenness that we see, that we experience, is a feature, not a bug, of a life lived without God. Now, even atheists will admit this is true. Michael Shermer is a well-known atheist. In his critique, The Believing Brain, he writes, "God is a myth. People believe in God because we are pattern-seeking, storytelling, myth-making, religious, moral animals." In other words, he's arguing that we're made that way. And he's right. We are made that way. The claim is we are made in the image of God, that we yearn for God because we were created to seek him. And the claim here is, if you knew him, you would be able to experience for yourself that satisfaction. You would know that he was all you need, the way, the truth, life itself. If you really know me, you will know. Do you believe this? You see, these verses, they speak to our hope, the hope that God has made himself known and knowable, that personally and powerfully he has intervened in our world, and that he's offering life in all its fullness through Jesus, but only through Jesus. Because at the heart of Christianity, not tenets to follow, but a person to know. He said, no one comes to the Father but through him. He says there's no other way. Do you believe this? Do you want to know him? Looking elsewhere is like grasping after a goal that you'll never reach. I heard it described in a really clever metaphor as being like an insect trapped inside a house, flying towards different electric light bulbs. But those are not the sun. They keep you inside. They shine with a light that's artificial. They don't lead to the warmth and freedom of outside. But no matter how many light bulbs that fly encounters, it shouldn't conclude there's no sun, nor stop seeking it. How then should you live if you believe this, if you know this? What should you do? Because it's also clear from what Jesus said that the purpose of his good news was not to just offer a personal and private consolation that didn't touch the rest of the disciples' lives. Paul took this up in 2 Corinthians chapter 5. Since then, we know what it is to fear the Lord. We try to persuade others, for Christ's love compels us. And he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again. Live for Jesus. Live like you know him. But to do that, you need to know him. So do you? Back to the chapter. This all took place the night before Jesus was to be crucified. And you can sense in reading it the weight of every word that Jesus spoke, dripping with the enormity of what he knew was to come, of the limited time that was left, and the amount of information he knew he had to impart to a motley crew of disciples who still didn't get it. Don't you know me, Philip, even after I've been with you such a long time? They didn't get it, and he knew they wouldn't fully, not yet. But they were not alone in their misconceptions. In fact, everybody who had encountered Jesus to that point had come to him with a fixed idea of who God was and of what the problem that they were looking for a solution to also was. His countrymen were people under occupation and had a well-defined expectation of what a deliverer, of what a Messiah would do. Those who thought that Jesus was the real deal saw his miracles and could imagine him raising an army, throwing out the Romans, restoring Jewish rule in Jerusalem. Some of them, most of the disciples in fact, probably imagined themselves as dignitaries in his new administration. Shortly before this, the people had previously tried to make Jesus king by force after he'd fed the 5,000. And he didn't only just withdraw into the mountains, he also put them off with a series of increasingly challenging sayings to make it very clear that was not what he was about. I'm the bread of life, and so on. And as he increasingly antagonized the religious authorities, it was becoming clearer that when he got to Jerusalem, things would come to a head. Because you had yet others who didn't believe that Jesus was the real deal, but also had that same idea of what a wannabe Messiah would do. And they were tired of this endless cycle of rebellion and then reprisal by the Romans. The local religious authorities didn't believe that Jesus was any different and just wanted to live in peace. Now he was in Jerusalem. It was Passover. Everyone knew where he was. He would either declare his kingdom or he'd be crushed by the authorities to stop things getting out of hand. What the disciples believed at this point is unclear, but they knew things were about to kick off. That's why, if you recall a few chapters back, they were fearful of him going to Bethany to see Lazarus. You recall he said, let's also go that we might die with him. What are you going to do? Are you going to leave us? What will happen to us? Are we on our own from here on out? Are our dreams of freedom over? Those were the unspoken questions at this supper, to which Jesus responded with, do not let your hearts be troubled. If you believe in God, the God of Israel, the one who didn't need you to fight his battles or forcibly make him king, Yahweh, I am that I am, the self-existent one, that one who was and is to come, then believe in me. Throw off your preconceptions as to who I should be and look at who I am. My words are not empty. They are validated by God and by the works I am doing. Believe on that evidence. If you want to know the way to freedom from oppression, from the powers and authorities that would condemn you, from the system that wants to hold you back, if you want to be the fullest expression of yourself and close the yawning gap in your soul, I am that way. A lot of us have children here, right? I bet if you asked them where they were, most of the time they couldn't tell you. They couldn't pinpoint it on a map. But as long as they're with you, they wouldn't say they're lost, would they? That's the comfort Jesus is extending here. If you're with him, if you know him, if you trust he's the way, that's all you need to know to get to where you need to be. He's saying, I am the way you need to go, and I am preparing that way for you. See the contrast here with Matthew 7, the Sermon on the Mount, where he says, narrow is the way that leads to life, and few there be that find it. Like much of the Sermon on the Mount, that passage then was saying that in our own strength, it's near impossible to meet God's exacting standards. And what Jesus was saying, what he was doing that night, was preparing the way. He was going to be the way to break us free from the hold that sin had over us and that had separated us from God's presence. He says he goes to prepare a place for us. That preparation then was his death. That was what made the way. The way is still narrow. It's through him. But the destination is big enough for everybody who believes. My Father's house has many rooms. So he says, if you believe that, you have to know me, the way to the singular truth you have been seeking, to the life that you want to lead. You have to follow me. And to do that, you have to know me. And I'm revealing myself to you. A few hours after this discourse, Jesus is arrested, brought before Pontius Pilate. Also another one who thinks he's seen this all before. Another rabble-rouser wanting to lead a revolution. Are you the king of the Jews, he asks. Jesus' reply, my kingdom is not of this world. You say that I'm a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I've come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. And Pilate's retort is very interesting. He says, what is the truth? What is the truth? And it's very often the case that when our own structures collide with God, the common human response is, what is the truth? Keep your talk of immutable truths out of politics, out of society, out of everyday life. It's one of a number of opinions everyone's entitled to have and entitled to keep to themselves. It's your truth, it's not the truth. What is the truth? Keep it as part of your private, interior conversation. And it's hard, it's not hard actually, to see why that's appealing on some levels. But if you go down that route, you end up with believing in a God that's detached and remote, not really concerned with actual people. And belief in that context is general spirituality, a sense of duty to others perhaps. And if you boil them all down, then all beliefs look the same. Pick and mix. One of the many things that disturbed me about the last US presidential election was TV images of Trump supporters outside the courtroom in Arizona praying fervently for the votes to be overturned. It really got to me, I have to admit. We were chatting about it at home over lunch with some friends, and Diana said something really, what I thought was very apt. She said, these people have interpretation issues, and I thought that was a really neat way of putting it. But look, we don't have to waste time litigating politics, because that's not really my point, nor what really strikes me now. Because it was at the same time you would have had people praying for the exact opposite, and people praying for something in between, or totally different. Everybody convinced that the way they espoused was the right response to the wrongs that they saw. All these voices going up to God earnestly. Will not the judge of the earth do right? But right in their eyes, each one speaking their truth. There's a whole lot of people with interpretation issues. And I sometimes wonder what sort of mental contortions people go through to twist what is a very simple gospel, in my opinion, and instead assign righteousness to individuals or movements just because they favor one of your pet causes, whatever that might be. Turning to anyone who's serving up propaganda, validating your feelings, and ignoring anything else that they will say that clearly goes against the way that Jesus lived. It always reminds me of his rebuke to the Pharisees, straining at gnats while swallowing camels. I think Jesus had a great way with words. But we all do it, don't we? We have our own pet causes, pet peeves, pet biases. Everybody wants to put their interpretation on God. And I, for one, struggle with this a lot in a world that seems to be pulling itself apart. People splintering into factions that have been nurtured over many years with many falsehoods. What do you do when right and wrong is considered subjective? And even sadder, when many of those calling for equity and redress standing with the downtrodden, are derided by those who claim to profess Christ. That saddens me the most. And often we're very concerned with not being painted with the wrong lot, those that have the interpretation issues, that we end up having nothing to say to anybody else, acquiescing with the view that we should keep it to ourselves, that would be somehow the liberal thing, the small c Christian thing. In so many ways, it feels like nothing's changed since that day, that night before crucifixion. People with their fixed notions of God, either trying to forcibly enthrone their point of view, or feeling they've had enough of the endless cycle of claim and counterclaim and don't believe it at all. How hopeless that feels. There's a world in turmoil crying out, but the solution is being obscured by a whole lot of light bulbs with their artificial light. Jesus instead is saying he is the truth. And note that while he said to Pilate, his kingdom is not of this world, his message was very much for this one, to deliver that truth. And so what if, rather than looking to incorporate our own interpretations, we looked to Jesus? Instead of being talked into watering down our Jesus-focused mission to everyone everywhere, we looked to him and got to know him. It says in verse 12, "Very truly I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works that I have been doing." So I'm asking again, do you know him? He is saying that people who do are called and equipped to think and act differently from those who don't. Those who claim Christ need to prove by what we do that there is a richer prize on offer. When we are being, for the world, what Jesus was, living his message of radical inclusion, of reckless, all-encompassing love, welcoming, healing, restoring, standing up for the downtrodden, then no one can deny the truth that we claim. John took up this point. I guess he learned the message very well that night. He took up this point in his letter. 1 John 2 verse 3, "We know that we have come to know him if we keep his commands. Whoever says, 'I know him,' but does not do what he commands is a liar, and the truth is not in that person. But if anyone obeys his word, love for God is truly made complete in them. This is how we know we are in him. Whoever claims to live in him must live as Jesus did." Live as Jesus did. Sounds easier said than done, right? Which brings us right back to the beginning. If it was easy as skipping a full-fat latte, everyone would be a champion tennis player, right? Wouldn't it be better instead to know what Novak would say was most important in the way he lived his life? Wouldn't it be better to have him guide you, teach you? Wouldn't it be better to know him? Looking back in John 14, verse 15 says, "If you love me, keep my commands, and I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to help you and be with you forever, the Spirit of truth." Goes on to say, verse 18, "I will not leave you as orphans, I will come to you. But the advocate, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you all things and will remind you of everything I have said to you." Advocate. The word used here literally means one called alongside to help. We aren't supposed to be casting about in the dark, wondering what would Jesus do. There's no need to be dazzled by those competing light bulbs of individual interpretation. The Son of Righteousness has risen, bringing healing in his wings. We are not alone. He has specifically empowered us with his Spirit to accomplish his will here on earth, to show that history is going somewhere under his mighty hand towards his new world of healing and hope. He says we are not orphans, we are children of God. And consider what that means. It means access to the Creator because of who we are, nothing more. He says, "I am the way to the singular truth you have been seeking, to the life you want to lead. You have to follow me, and to do that you have to know me, and I'm revealing myself to you by my Spirit." I guess it's time to come into land. Where am I going with this? Do you know him? If not, he wants you to know that he is who you have been searching for, that the Lord is your shepherd, and in him you have everything you need. You are safe in his arms. He said, "I have come that they might have life and have it to the full." There is an authentic expression of who God made you to be, that you are crying out for. And he wants to show you that through following him daily in faith, there is a richer, better, more meaningful life than we could ever find on our own. We may not see the way ahead, but like a child, we need only know that there is indeed a way, and that we will be able to find it simply by knowing and trusting that he will lead us where we need to go. Do you know him? If you believe in God, in the God who says, I am, the self-existent one, the one who doesn't need you to fight his battles for him or forcibly make him kings, then throw off your preconceptions and instead look at Jesus, who said he came not to be served, but to serve, to rescue, to heal, to love. Live out who Jesus is by living as he did, by loving as he did, as he does, so that people see him and come to him, drawn by the powerful love of God into fellowship and to new life. As the old hymn says, go spread the tidings round, wherever human hearts and human woes abound. It finishes with, lo, the great King of Kings, with healing in his wings, to every captive soul a full deliverance brings. And through the vacant cells, the song of triumph rings, the Comforter has come. For his Spirit is here. His arms are open wide. We don't need to guess at what would Jesus do. Just return to him in humility. Let the Spirit intercede, our advocate, called alongside to help counter our ignorance, our interpretation issues. The Spirit of God. The promise is one of comfort in the storm, that Jesus is the answer. And the question for us is only, do you know him? Do you want to?